All right, thanks everybody. My name is Zachary Berkland. I'm the business manager for the SBIR and STTR Program Management Office located at Ames Research Center. To my right, I've got my colleague Bill Toscano. He's also located in the Program Management Office and helps us do all sorts of things. And to his right, you'll recognize Ben Benvenuti, who was helping me on some of these panels earlier. He's the contract lead at the NSSC for the SBIR and STTR program.
Yep.
Don't want to promote you just yet. Just before we get started, I want to say that Colorado is my home. I grew up here. I am a University of Denver pioneer, so I don't know if we've got any pioneers in the audience, but ever since the first time we put on this event, I've been talking to Art, and we've been just like dreaming of bringing it to Colorado, center of the country, get more people involved. So, do we have any pioneers? Okay, it's all right. All right, go DU hockey. Anyway, without further ado, I'm really excited to tell you guys about the post-phase 2 opportunities. I'll probably take about 8 or 10 minutes, and then we'll go to a panel. We know you guys have lots of very specific questions or general questions, and also if you want to come up to any of us afterwards, we know that there's a lot of particular situations with regard to matching investor funds, and we can help you guys with those. So first of all, here's a programmatic overview of sort of where our post-phase 2s fit in the time cycle. So obviously, as you can tell by the name, it's after phase 2. And we just keep putting as many programs in that little window before phase 3 as we are authorized to by legislation. We obviously cannot fund a phase 3, but we can fund the option on your phase 2, which is a 2E. And some of you still may have some X's straggling out there. But going forward, we just have the E, and that's $375,000 of matching from your investor. We also have the sequential phase 2, which is something that we're starting to pilot, and then the CCRPP, which is $500,000 to $1 million of matching funds, which just got released, and the due date for applications to that is December 14th. So first I want to talk about the phase 2Es. The objective of the phase 2Es is to encourage the advancement of innovations and develop under your phase 2 via an option for further R&D efforts underway. So you really want to take that phase 2 a little bit further. You've shown that you've been able to go out into the market and get interest in an investor. So for us to exercise that, it doesn't take any further competition. Once you've gone out and got that matching investor funds, this is a very high percentage get, and it's something that is very efficient for us to exercise, and we've been making great use of that. So I would encourage you, if you have a phase 2, to make sure you're aware of your option and your application period for it. So I basically said all of this, but it's getting those matching investor funds can be from a number of different areas. You can go to a NASA program. You can go to an external investor, a private investor. You can go to another government agency to be the matching investor funds, or a number of different areas. So if you go and get matching investor funds, they just cannot be spent. They have to be ready to use at the time that your period of performance starts. Funding specifics for phase 2E, the minimum of non-SBI or STTR funding required is $25,000. We really want to encourage you to go get a sizable investment, so that's sort of our rationale there, up to a max of $375,000. So that will bring the maximum cumulative award for your phase 2 plus your 2E match up to $1.125 million. And the phase 2E submission period is kind of unique. It starts after the 12th month of performance and ends 60 days before the contract end date. And that's a window that we're sort of playing around with. We really need to get your application in as soon as possible so that we can exercise it before the end of your contract. CCRPP is a program that we had some really great success with, and we've been trying to revitalize it and make it more user-friendly and available to more people. This has got a higher cap, like I said, and I'll get into that in a second. But this is going to come after your phase 2 and 2E, and really be a way that we can invest in your technology and get you to commercialization. That's the whole point, is if you need a little bit more to get out into the market or to serve that NASA need or private need. So we're definitely going to be looking at your commercialization plan on this one. So who can apply? You have to have completed an SBIR STTR Phase 2 from NASA. Currently, our window is from 2010 to 2014. That's at our discretion. Some of the thinking behind that is we don't want to conflict with your 2E performance period. If you've had a phase 1 and then a phase 2 and your phase 2E is under performance, it should be clear by the end of this window. So as we go through and develop the program into the future, this window may shift. So keep an eye on that. Just because you're not eligible now doesn't mean you won't be later. We also put the restriction on that you've not received a CCRPP or CRP from another federal agency for this specific technology, and that you've secured investors. This one point cannot include the owners if you're just putting your own money back into the company. We really want to encourage you to go out and get an external investor. So this current round of the CRP that's open is the minimum investor funding required to apply is $500,000 with a maximum of $1 million. If you're familiar with the program from last year, that's down from $2 million, and we're still trying to get the right adjustment for level of investment and progress. So it's something that we're toying around with, but we really want it to be the best program for the agency and for the small business. Period of performance on that, 24 months as a general guideline, but there's nothing hard and fast there. And then phase 3. Phase 3 is the ultimate thing, and I actually got a laugh from somebody in the audience last year when I said this, but a phase 3 can, you can get your phase 1 on a Monday, and that immediately opens the door for you to non-competitively or post-competition receive a phase 3 for any value, duration, within the FAR, of course, and agency limitations, which I think at NASA is still 5 years, but you can get an unlimited amount of phase 3 follow-on. So you get your phase 1 on a Monday, you can get awarded a $1 billion phase 3 on Tuesday. You know, that's okay. That was the line that got a laugh last year. And if you do, we want to hear about it. Yeah, some amazing features of phase 3. You're accorded all of your SBIR data rights, and it continues that 4-year clock we were talking about yesterday. No further competition is required for phase 1 or phase 2. You satisfy SECA as soon as you get in with your phase 1 or phase 2. There's no limit on the number, duration, type, or dollar value of phase 3s that you can obtain. So like once you get your phase 1, it's really your golden ticket to get in and start getting your phase 3s. This is the biggest value of the program. There's no limit on the time that may elapse between a phase 1 or 2 and your phase 3, or more successive phase 3s. So if you got a phase 1 the very first year the SBIR program came out in the 80s, you could get a phase 3 on that this year. Any federal agency may enter into a phase 3 SBIR agreement at any time with somebody who's been awarded a phase 1 or phase 2. So if we wanted to go invest in a phase 3 that the Air Force awarded, we can do that. And then additionally, the size limitations that apply for phase 1 and phase 2 do not apply to phase 3. So you can grow, you can become a large business and continue to get these phase 3s indefinitely. You can also sell your business and have that acquiring business continue to get those phase 3. So the value does not depreciate once you grow, and you can communicate that value to a potential purchaser. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. So I know we're going to have a lot of questions here. I think we have about 15 minutes, so we should be able to get through a lot of them. And if we can start running the mics around and just wave at me. This gentleman here.
Yes, Peter Bond from Inertial Wave. You mentioned that the phase 3 is available once you have a phase 1. Does that work across all agencies? In other words, if I have a phase 1 SBIR from the Army, can I get a phase 3 from NASA or a phase 3 from DARPA?
Absolutely. Yes. No restrictions on that. It's a huge value of the phase 3s. And we love to see it when we go across agencies, because then we're able to hook up our cores with, you know, maybe the previous cores and see if the missions can overlap, and you can introduce them. I think I saw another one. Oh, we've got some.
Is there a time limit on when you can get a phase 3 from a phase 1 or phase 2?
Nope.
So 20 years from now, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So if you look at your lanyard, you'll see REI Systems. They are an incredible success story of the SBIR and STTR program. They received a phase 1 for data management like 30 years ago, and have been receiving follow-on phase 3s, and they're very involved in our program today. They build our website, they manage the electronic handbook, and we continue to go to them, and they're an incredible company.
Hey, Zach, I think I'm confused now. Okay, if I have a phase 3, phase 1, that ended in 2005. And Bill is a smart program manager, said, hey, 2005, this guy had a phase 1. Now I have a mission need. Can he pull me up and
get a phase 3?
No, there is a time limit, right? That
you can get a phase 3. There's no time limit between.
I didn't do any work for you, nothing.
That's fine.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
it has to
he's
be an extension and development of that phase 2 technology. There is absolutely no limitation.
No phase 2. I ended as a phase 1 in 2005.
Yeah, phase 1.
I can.
Yep.
Okay.
Zach, could I just add that just in a practical, you're absolutely correct, but in practical sense that you do want to be aware of the data rights. You have four years at NASA, I think 5 at DOD. So if you're continuing to get phase 3s and keeping your data rights alive, that's one thing. But if you haven't got a phase 3, you know, for 20 years, then your data rights probably out there, and your technology is probably a little dated.
Right, but you can still get a phase 3.
That is correct.
So I just have a comment. So I think everybody should print that slide and carry it around with you, because I think we touched on this yesterday. Every single contracting officer isn't going to know that you've had an SBIR with DOD or NASA or whoever you have an SBIR with, and they're going to challenge you on that information. And so if you have that slide and you say, look, this is a fact, you could do this, because it goes against every grain in an acquisition person's body to give you a direct award off of an SBIR, because they're not all familiar with these rules. So I think that's a great slide. I'm going to steal it for my presentations, and I think everybody should print it out and carry it around, because you're going to need it.
That's absolutely true. I'll say I'm guilty of this. In a past life, I was a contracting officer, and I think I had an SBIR company come to me and say, you know, hey, I've had an SBIR before. Do you really need to go through all this paperwork? And I was like, no, I need to document all of this. And what I really needed was their phase 1 or phase 2 contract number. I needed a statement that linked how the technology was logically developed from those previous awards, and then you can go forward without further seek a justification.
And that's a great point. Don't lose the contracts from 20 years ago or whatever. Don't lose the contracts.
Yeah, know your contract numbers, know your SBIR rights. Not everybody in government is familiar with them, but you are absolutely entitled to those.
Just for a little bit of like ancient historical perspective, I started with some SBIRs way back when, and 6 or 7 flight hardware technologies arose in different pathways from those. And concurrently, we developed probably 8 different commercial products out of NASA and Navy and NIH SBIRs. Some of those things are still pumping away in chemical plants across the globe and such. So we've had some success. We've had a lot of failures. We've got a lot of things hung up in the valley of death, and I walked away and for a few years. And the 2 things that got me back into this business as a what I call a grunt CEO at this point are the Next Step program, where Mars looks like it could really happen in my lifetime, and the post-phase 2 opportunities that really address the deficiencies in the SBIR program, and that the traditional phase 1, phase 2 model creates SBIR mills. It doesn't necessarily create commercial product lines in the vast majority of cases, and people have put a lot of effort into trying to improve outcomes economically, and I think that's absolutely important, because if we can sustain ourselves economically, we'll get all the help we want out of Capitol Hill, theoretically. But in all those cases, the commercial product development was at least as much of a gleam in our eye as the NASA end use. And the thing that has caught my attention on the CCRPP, which is the particular program that they called me up and told me about it. I didn't even know what it was. The 2010 to 2014 window, I mean, I think Uber or somebody, I mean, there are companies that have been built up, responded to a market need, and they're $1 billion+ valuations that are not that old. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the phase 2E and phase CCRPP, which I thought was a phase 3, maybe it's not. I don't think those 2 things are necessarily mutually exclusive, and can delay our entry into a market in a very critical way, because I cannot do both all of the commercial work and all the NASA work that gets done. I have to bring somebody in to do that, and I need the CCRP, for example, and the co-investment to fund that. Now, in a model that works there, we can bring in a lot of private capital for these things and make this program as big as the market will allow. But we were really, and this is obviously, I'm writing one right now, a CCRPP for this solicitation. I was going to write 2, but the second contract is in its phase 2 right now. We're ready to start building instruments, because we can not only build the instrument we're doing for NASA for commercial markets, we can also spin out several more designs out of that platform for multiple markets within the chemical process industries and laboratory analysis and environmental monitoring. Mm-hmm. So do you have any ability to revisit that requirement, and is it a very hard requirement?
So it's not a hard requirement. It's a portfolio decision. It's an investment decision that we make. If we're investing in you to perform in a 2E, our current philosophy on it is we want to see you develop that 2E and finish out that period of performance, and then go with CRP. But like I said, the program is in fluctuation currently. As you see, we're changing it from year to year. So I appreciate your perspective, and we're listening. And that's something that we'll take into account when we make decisions like that.
So let me follow up on that question. So as Zach said, we want you folks who have phase 2 contracts, take advantage of the E. And I can tell you, for the investors, probably half of them come from non-SBIR program money. So when you do have your phase 2 contract, get to know your core, because your core is your best person to tell you where the opportunities are to get that kind of funding. 30% of that funding for phase 2Es comes from industry, including VCs. And the investors range from Boeing, Airbus, VCs I just mentioned, Rolls-Royce, the list goes on. And we've given you a long window, a long window to go find those investors, 10 months. As soon as you get into your 12th month, start thinking about external investors and go after them. We give out, there's probably at any time 300 phase 2 contracts are eligible for phase 2 program, and we only get 40 proposals. So there are a lot of you folks out there not taking advantage of it. Now, once you complete the phase 2E, we want you to go after CCRPP, go out and get more money, because we want you to advance that TRL value. So now you're in a good position to go after some real big bucks. Now that's a point where you're going to have to probably relinquish some of your equity. But that's what you want to do to get past this valley of death. Another point I want to point out is that we even have people who have tipping point contracts have come to us and they have invested in a phase 2E. So there's a lot of crossing the different SBR programs where we allowed that to happen. So as I said, talk to your core, talk to the subtopic manager, and get really knowledgeable what NASA's looking for infusion. But hopefully it'll be something that's commercially viable eventually.
Right, and we realize that like as you move up the TRL spectrum, it's going to take more and more capital to get to potentially that next TRL. If you need to have on-flight in order to demonstrate an in-operation environment, like we understand that. So that's why we're really trying to invest in our post-phase 2 opportunities right now and make more available.
And there were some situations where the investor gave us on a phase 2E more than 375K. They donated 500K, 600K, but SBR only gave 375K. But that's good for you. You got an investor who really believes in the technology and wants to see you become commercial.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah. Okay, great. I've got at least 2 questions, maybe a 3rd question. But my first question, the way, Zachary, you described it is a little different than how it's posted on FBO. So it sounds like you prefer if the 2E or the 2X is completed before the company gets on contract for a CCRPP.
So that's our current philosophy with it. Because we've seen instances where somebody will apply to a 2E with very similar work or work that needs to be completed really before their CRP can start. And having those 2 windows conflicting seemed to pose a couple of challenges for us last year. So that's why we're trying to deconflict those and see how it goes.
Okay, and if I can ask 2 more questions. So
can I just follow up really quickly to that? So
sure.
That doesn't mean if you didn't get an E that you can't apply for the CCRPP.
Absolutely.
So to
That's
be very,
correct.
very clear, if you weren't planning already to do an E, and you have a completed CCRP, an eligible window, you can still apply for the CCRPP. It's not like you have to do an E before you do a CCRPP. We saw some folks the last time apply for both, and so then it was a staging issue, right, about which one has to come first and how they order the work and making sure that it's not conflicting work. That question came up earlier in an earlier panel.
But I'll tell you this, your odds are better going after a phase 2E than a CCRPP. So think about that.
So, and yeah, and we just got on a 2X. So we actually won one of the last round for the 2X with a phase 3. And like I said, and we have a CCRPP from another phase 2. So it's been great for us, but we want to try to take advantage of it more, kind of thing. So, but you mentioned the sequential phase 2 as a pilot program. So how do we get that process started? We just go through our core?
So the way right now currently is just do great work, okay? Stand out. It's on us to reach out to you for the sequential opportunity. So if you're going to be into that program, you'll be contacted and asked to provide a phase 2 sequential proposal. And we're still working out exactly how we want to execute that, and we're talking with other agencies and seeing how they execute that authority.
The goal of the sequential is you may have a technology that NASA really likes for infusion, and they want to see it get up to a higher TRL value. So SBIR has agreed we will invite certain companies where we've heard from other NASA people they need this technology. So we invite you to submit a proposal. It's invitation only, and then if you pass or whatever the review process, we want you to get this a higher TRL value. Now the secondary goal is selling for the commercial market, but the primary goal is infusion.
Okay, and I do have one last question, sorry. So, sorry, because this is for you, Ben. So we got selected for our 2X in March, and we didn't actually get the awards for 6 months. So, so then we have external investors saying, you know, what's going on? We have this 45-day window, and then they're supposed to provide the investment after getting selected, but then we just waited for the NASA contract to get turned on. So did we just have a bad window, or what are you doing to improve those timelines?
So we are aware that some of the timelines were too long on some of the phase 2X's and E's this past. We were in other award cycles, and we're looking at we've internally addressed ways to improve that.
I mean, NSSC, they're great. I mean, they're processing, what, 600, 700 contracts a year for SBIR program? And as Jen said
yeah,
yesterday,
what percentage are on time? They do great work.
they do great work. And as Jen said, we're getting some of these things. Yeah, great. So.
No, but we realize, and we're looking internally and how to do that a lot quicker than that.
Yeah, so everybody knows the really busy season for the NSSC is April through August. So if you've got a window for your ENX early and you want a quicker award on an ENX, it might be in your interest to not put April and August, because that's a really busy season. So when you have a window to apply, just think about that.
And just, thank you, Jen. And then just one comment. I also want to say that we're measuring all of our lead times, right? So we're aware of the things that are taking longer, and we're working on internal processes hand in hand with the NSSC to improve our EHB interaction with them, and ways that we can operate and get documents to them and just keep the processes moving. So we're trying to perform better. So yeah, we do appreciate I think we've got a question here, or, oh, we've got one over here.
I have a question about phase 3. So I understand we need to write a letter or a statement saying our work is relevant to a particular NASA program. So who writes that letter? Can we write it and give it to the core?
Relevant to, continuing from your phase 1 or 2. So you have to continue that. That's what you need to link to. Link to the contract number and link to the technology that you are developing, so that phase 3 is continuing to develop off of that.
And I guess it's okay that the company writes a letter and gives it to the NASA core?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Is it okay if the SBIR company writes that letter and gives it to the core, or does it have to come from NASA?
I mean, you can explain how that, if you're aware of the requirement, you can explain how that technology would be further developed and help give them that backup material. But for us, it's going to have to come from the core, coming to the NSSC or the CO who's going to be executing it. But there's nothing preventing you from explaining your technology, explaining how it would be further developed, and the different capabilities that you could add to it. Be in close communication with your core. Ben, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and it would talk to the core, see if they actually have a need for the, most of the goal is for the phase 3s to be commercialized at that point in time, and see if they have a need or for the infusion part of it.
I was told I have time for one more question. Do we have a mic floating? I see a hand here. Okay, great, thanks.
This just came up. Why doesn't NASA provide as much flexibility as possible for matching funds to be acquired and gotten? Because it's hard during a phase 2. So an example is, we want a phase 2, NASA. State of Tennessee requires us for their program to inject $150K into that. We want it. We go to NASA and say, we got $150K within the first year. NASA says, sorry, you have to do it in this time frame, which is counterproductive. I mean, I would think you'd want to get as much SBA money that's allocated to SBIRs as possible. Instead, it's this tiny window. It's just like everything we've been saying. It's not helpful to get investment capital. Investors want to do it when they want to do it, and we need as much time to try and do that as possible. And state run agencies have their own ideas too, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Is there any way to, you guys could try and change that to make it more flexible so that
Well,
you
we-
can get
we-
matching funds anytime during phase two?
Well, what we do is we put a very large window. We say the window starts when you submit your Phase 2E proposal. Well, that's what I'm talking about, matching funds. The window for accepting the matching funds start when you submit your Phase 2E proposal to 45 days after award selection date. And that could be a span of 4 months. Now, the other issue that sometimes people have is, well, I've got an existing contract, State of Tennessee, for example. They want to give me the award, and it's like 2 days or it's a month before you submit proposal. Well, you've got the contract with Tennessee, fine. You get to a point where now you want to get credit for it, they can modify the contract and say, hey, part of this money wants to go towards SBIR, and they date it a day after you submit your proposal. That's okay with us. So there's some flexibility there. You can still do it. And I've done it with other state agencies. I'm sorry, I allowed it. I'm not NASA, I'm a contractor. But I put my stamp approval on it so that PMO would recommend that so that NASA would fund it, go to award selection.
All right. Thank you, everybody.